Hello, friends. I'm Harry. On this channel, we unveil lost letters from history, raw, unfiltered confessions of the human heart. Tune in and take a journey through time, one letter at a time. Lost letter. Your cat still waits by the window. October 1918. My dearest Charles, I hope this letter finds you well, though I know the chances grow slimmer each day that any of my words will reach you before this dreadful business is finished. The postmaster, Mr. Henley, tells me that mail to the Western Front is backed up something terrible, what with the flu taking so many of the postal workers. Half the town is down with it, Charles. Mrs. Patterson from next door passed just last Tuesday. I helped prepare her for burial, and her hands were still soft as a child's. But I don't mean to start with such grim news. You always said I had a way of leading with the storms instead of the sunshine, didn't you? Eleanor, you'd say, tell me something that made you smile today before you tell me what made you frown. So here it is, my love. Smokey made me smile today. He's sitting by the parlor window as I write this, just as he has every evening since you left. His tail twitches whenever he hears footsteps on Maple Street, and his ears perk up at the sound of any man's voice drifting through the glass. I swear that cat has more faith than I do some days. He's gotten particular about his meals lately. Won't touch the scraps I used to give him. No, sir. He turns his nose up at everything except, and you'll laugh at this, Charles, except beef stew. Your beef stew, or at least my attempt at making it the way you did. Remember how you'd brown the meat just so, letting it get those crispy edges you said made all the difference. And then you'd add that splash of wine you thought I didn't notice, though I always knew because you'd get that guilty look, like a boy caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Well, Smokey seems to have inherited your taste for the finer things. I made a pot last Sunday, following that recipe you wrote out for me in your careful hand before you shipped out. The paper's gotten soft from my handling it so much, and there's a grease stain on the corner where I spilled a bit of the broth. But every word is still clear. Beef stew for my Eleanor, who burns water, but has the sweetest heart this side of heaven. You always were too kind, my darling. I served Smokey a bowl, and he ate every last bit, then sat by his empty dish and looked at me with those green eyes of his, so much like yours when you wanted something, until I gave him another helping. I think he remembers the smell of you on that recipe, Charles. I think it comforts him the way it comforts me. The house has gotten so quiet without you. I never realized how much noise one man could make until the silence settled in. No more of your humming while you shaved in the morning. No more of your boots on the kitchen floor when you'd sneak down for a midnight snack. No more of your laugh echoing from the back porch when you'd read me the funny parts from the newspaper. I've taken to leaving the radio on most hours of the day just to fill the emptiness. There's a program that plays music from before the war, waltzes and such. Yesterday they played that song we danced to at the Harvest Festival. Do you remember? After the ball is over. You stepped on my feet, something terrible, but I didn't mind, because you held me so close I could smell the bay rum on your collar and feel your heartbeat against my cheek. Smokey doesn't care for the radio much. He gives it suspicious looks, like he's trying to figure out where the voices are coming from. But he settles down when the music starts, curls up on your chair. Yes, Charles, he's claimed your chair by the fireplace, and purrs that deep, rumbling purr that sounds like distant thunder. I've been talking to him more lately. Is that foolish? I suppose it is, but he's such a good listener, and sometimes the silence gets so heavy I feel like I might drown in it. I tell him about my day, about the ladies at the Red Cross who are knitting socks for soldiers like you. Mrs. Whitmore showed us how to turn the heels just right, so they won't rub and cause blisters. I've made 6 pairs so far, and I pretend they're all for you, though I know they'll go to boys whose names I'll never know. I tell Smokey about the garden, too, how the last of the tomatoes finally came in, fat and red and perfect for canning. I put up 23 jars this year, more than we'll ever need, but I kept thinking you'd want your favorite tomato preserves when you come home. The cellar shelves are full to bursting with all the things I've saved for you. Pickled beets, green beans, peach jam made from the fruit on our old tree. That tree's been producing something fierce this year, Charles. I swear the branches were so heavy with peaches in August that I thought they might break. I gave away bushels to the neighbors, and still there were more than I knew what to do with. Mrs. Henderson said it was a sign, nature providing before a hard winter. But I think it's just the tree showing off, the way you used to when you come home with your arms full of wildflowers you'd picked for me on your way back from the mill. Smokey helped with the canning in his way. Mostly, he sat on the kitchen table and supervised, occasionally batting at the jar lids when I wasn't looking fast enough to suit him. He knocked 3 jars to the floor, made a terrible mess, but I couldn't stay angry with him. He looked so much like you used to when you'd break something and try to charm your way out of trouble. "Eleanor," you'd say, "I was just trying to help." And then you'd flash that crooked smile that made my knees go weak from the day I met you until the day you left. The nights are getting colder now. I can feel winter creeping in around the edges of things, in the way the floorboards creak when the temperature drops, in the sound the wind makes through the bare branches of the maple out front. I've started banking the fire higher, and I pulled your heavy quilt out of the cedar chest. It still smells like you, Charles. Like the soap you used and the tobacco you'd smoke on the back porch, and something else that was just you. Smokey has taken to sleeping on your side of the bed. I tried to discourage it at first. You know how you always said cats belonged on the floor, not on the furniture. But he was so determined, and the house felt so empty without another heartbeat nearby. Now he curls up right where your head used to rest on the pillow, and sometimes, in the half-light of dawn, I can almost pretend it's you there beside me, breathing slow and steady. I've been having the strangest dreams, my love. Dreams where you're sitting at the kitchen table drinking your coffee and reading the paper like nothing ever changed. In the dreams, I try to tell you about the war, about you being gone, but you just smile and pat the chair beside you. "Sit down, Eleanor," you say. "Tell me about your day." And for those few minutes before I wake, everything is exactly as it should be. But then I open my eyes, and there's only Smokey, watching me with those patient green eyes of his, waiting for me to remember where I am, when I am, why the other side of the bed is cold. I worry about him sometimes, Charles. He's gotten thinner since you left, despite all the beef stew. Dr. Morrison says animals can pine just like people, that they can get heartsick and waste away from missing someone too much. The thought scares me more than I care to admit. What would I do if I lost him, too? He's my last living connection to you, the only one in this house who remembers the sound of your laugh, the weight of your footsteps, the particular way you had of scratching behind his ears that made him purr like a motor car. The other day, I found him in your study, sitting on your desk chair and staring at the space where you used to sit when you balanced the household accounts. He wasn't moving, just sitting perfectly still like a statue, and for a moment I thought the worst. But when I called his name, he turned to look at me, and I swear I saw something in his expression that looked like confusion, like he couldn't understand where you'd gone, why your chair was empty, why the room smelled more like dust than pipe tobacco. I picked him up and held him close, and he didn't fight me the way he usually does. He just went limp in my arms and pressed his face against my neck, and I felt his little body trembling, or maybe I was the one trembling. It's hard to tell anymore, Charles. Some days I feel like I'm coming apart at the seams, and only Smokey's solid warmth keeps me stitched together. The war news gets worse every day. They say it's nearly over, but they've been saying that for months now. The Spanish flu is taking almost as many as the fighting, maybe more. Young men who survived the trenches are dying in field hospitals, burning up with fever, while their mothers wait for letters that will never come. I try not to think about it too much. Instead, I focus on small things. The way Smokey's whiskers twitch when he's dreaming, the sound of rain on the roof, the smell of bread baking in Mrs. Patterson's old kitchen next door. Her daughter moved in last week to settle the estate, and she's been baking constantly, apple bread, dinner rolls, cinnamon cake. The whole street smells like a bakery, and it reminds me of when we were first married and I thought I could impress you with my cooking. Lord, what disasters I created. Remember the chicken I tried to roast for your birthday? Black as coal on the outside, raw as January on the inside. You ate every bite and told me it was delicious, even though I could see you chewing each piece like it was made of leather. Later, I found you in the kitchen, frying eggs for both of us and humming under your breath like nothing had happened. Charles Whitfield, I said, you are the worst liar in creation. Maybe so, you replied, pulling me close with your free hand, but I'm the luckiest man in creation, too. Oh, how I miss your lies, darling, your sweet, transparent lies that fooled no one but made everything better somehow. Smokey has no patience for my cooking disasters. He's far more discriminating than you ever were. If I burn the biscuits, he won't even sniff them. If I oversalt the soup, he walks away with his tail in the air, dignity intact. Sometimes I think he's judging me by your standards, finding me wanting in all the ways you never did. But he forgives me when I get the beef stew right. That's when he purrs and rubs against my legs and looks at me like I'm not completely hopeless after all. Those are the moments when I feel closest to you, Charles, when I'm stirring the pot and the smell fills the kitchen, and for just an instant I can pretend you might walk through the door any moment, hungry and tired and glad to be home. The postmaster says the mail situation should improve soon. They're hiring new workers, men who were turned away from the army for one reason or another. I keep hoping that means my letters will start reaching you again, and yours will start reaching me. It's been so long since I heard from you, my love. So long since I saw your handwriting on an envelope or felt that little flutter of excitement when Mrs. Patterson called out, "Letter for you, Eleanor," Your last letter is wearing thin from my reading it. The ink is starting to fade in places, and the paper has developed tiny tears where I've folded and unfolded it so many times. You wrote about the mud and the cold, about missing my coffee, and the way Smokey would steal bacon from your plate when he thought no one was looking. You wrote about coming home, about all the things we'd do when this terrible business was finished. We'll plant a bigger garden, you wrote, grow enough vegetables to feed half the county, and I'll build that porch swing you've been wanting, the one where we can sit in the evenings and watch the fireflies come out. Smokey can sit between us and pretend he's not begging for attention while he's doing exactly that. I read those words every night before I sleep, Charles. I picture that porch swing, hear the creak of the chains and the sound of your voice telling me about your day. I imagine Smokey stretched out across both our laps, warm and content, and utterly convinced that he's the center of the universe. It's a good dream, darling. It helps me sleep. But some nights, the dream feels more real than this empty house. And when I wake up alone, the world seems darker than it did before. Those are the nights when I reach for Smokey, bury my fingers in his soft fur, and whisper all the things I wish I could say to you. How proud I am, how much I love you, how sorry I am for every cross word we ever exchanged. Do you remember our first fight, Charles? We'd been married 3 months, and you came home late from the mill without sending word. I'd kept supper warm for hours, watching the food dry out on the plates while I imagined all the terrible things that might have happened to you. When you finally walked through the door, I lit into you like a wild cat. All fear turned to fury in the space of a heartbeat. You stood there and took it, never raising your voice, never making excuses. When I finally ran out of steam, you pulled me into your arms and said, "You're right to be angry, Eleanor. I should have sent word. I was thoughtless, and I'm sorry." I cried then, great heaving sobs of relief and leftover fear. You held me until I was quiet, then sat me down at the table and warmed up that dried-out supper, eating every bite like it was a feast. Later, when we were lying in bed, you promised you'd always find a way to let me know if you were going to be late. "I never want you to worry about me, Eleanor," you said. "I never want you to wonder if I'm coming home." And you kept that promise, Charles. Every day, until the day you left for France, you found a way to let me know where you were, when you'd be home, that you were safe. Even now, I keep expecting a telegram, a letter, some word that will tell me you're all right, that you're thinking of me, that you're still planning to build that porch swing and plant that bigger garden. Smokey seems to expect it too. Every afternoon, when the postman makes his rounds, Smokey positions himself by the front window. He watches Mr. Henley walk up the street, stopping at this house and that one, and his whole body goes tense with anticipation. When the postman passes our door without stopping, Smokey's shoulders sag in a way that breaks my heart. But he never gives up hope. The next day, there he is again, watching and waiting, tail twitching with possibility. I try to learn from his example, Charles. I try to believe that tomorrow might be the day, that the next letter might be the one I've been waiting for. I've started writing more often, not because I have more news to share, but because the act of writing to you makes you feel closer somehow, as if my words could somehow cross the ocean and find you wherever you are, as if love could be a bridge across any distance, any silence. Mrs. Henderson tells me I should consider the possibility that, well, she thinks I should prepare myself for bad news. She means well, I know she does. But she doesn't understand what Smokey and I understand. That some connections are stronger than death. That some love transcends whatever happens to these frail bodies of ours. When I look at Smokey waiting by that window, I see faith made manifest. Pure, stubborn, unreasonable faith that refuses to accept defeat. He knows you're coming home, Charles. He knows it in his bones, in his heart, in every fiber of his being. And watching him, I know it too. So I'll keep writing these letters, my darling. I'll keep making your beef stew and sleeping under your quilt and telling Smokey all the news. I'll keep the fire burning and the coffee hot and the door unlocked because somewhere, somehow, you're finding your way back to us. And when you finally walk through that door, when Smokey leaps from his perch by the window and runs to greet you, when you scoop him up in those strong hands of yours and he purrs so loud the whole house shakes, I'll be here waiting too. We both will. We always will. Come home soon, my love. Come home to your cat and your wife and your beef stew. Come home to the garden we'll plant and the porch swing we'll build and all the ordinary beautiful days we have yet to share. Your devoted wife, Eleanor. Postscript. Smokey says to tell you he's been keeping your chair warm. He also wants you to know that the mice in the cellar have gotten entirely too bold in your absence, and he could use some assistance dealing with them. Apparently, a one-cat operation isn't sufficient for proper mouse management. His words, not mine. Lost letter. The horse remembers your voice. September 22nd, 1863. My dear son Thomas, I hope this letter finds you well and whole, though I fear my words may never reach you with all the troubles on the roads these days. The mail rider came through last week, but he looked haggard as an old scarecrow and said he couldn't promise when he'd make another run this way. Too many bridges out between here and wherever it is you boys are fighting now. Pennsylvania, was it? Or maybe Virginia again? Lord knows I can't keep track of all the places this war has dragged you, but I'm not writing to burden you with an old man's worries about the mail. I'm writing because of old Jack. That horse of yours has got me more puzzled than a Methodist at a barn dance, son. Ever since you rode off with Captain Morrison's company back in the spring, Jack has been, well, there's no other word for it, but stubborn. Stubborn as your grandmother's mule and twice as ornery. He won't pull the plow for me, won't haul the harvest wagon, won't even let me put a halter on him without a fight that leaves us both winded and frustrated. Yesterday, I tried to hitch him to the cultivator so I could work the south field before the weather turns, and that fool horse acted like I was asking him to fly to the moon. Danced and shied away from me like I was some stranger come to steal him, not the man who's fed him oats and molasses every morning for the past 3 years. Had to get your brother Samuel to help hold him, and even then Jack kept turning his big head toward the road, ears pricked forward like he was listening for something the rest of us couldn't hear. Pa, Samuel said to me, I think that horse is waiting for Tom to come home. And you know what, Thomas? I think your little brother might be right. Animals know things we don't, son, always have. Your mother used to say, I understood the creatures better than I understood people, and maybe that was true. People lie with their words, but animals don't know how to lie with their hearts. They feel what they feel, pure and simple, and they don't dress it up in fancy talk or try to hide it behind polite manners. Old Jack feels something, Thomas, something that's got him all stirred up and watchful. He spends most of his time now standing at the gate that looks out toward the main road, the one that leads to town and then beyond to wherever this war has taken you. His ears are always forward, always listening. Sometimes I catch him with his head raised high, nostrils flared, testing the wind like he's trying to catch your scent from 100 miles away. The other horses don't act this way. Buttercup and Daisy go about their business same as always, eating grass, swishing flies, dozing in the afternoon sun. But not Jack. That horse is waiting for something, and I'm starting to think he knows something the rest of us don't. 3 nights ago, I was sitting on the porch after supper, smoking my pipe, and listening to the September crickets sing their last songs before the frost comes. The air was still and heavy, the way it gets before a storm, though there wasn't a cloud in the sky. That's when I heard it, a sound like distant thunder, but wrong somehow. Too regular, too rhythmic, like a giant's heartbeat echoing across the hills. I was trying to puzzle out what it might be when old Jack came galloping up from the pasture, snorting and wild-eyed. He ran straight to that gate of his and stood there trembling, every muscle in his body tight as a drawn bowstring. His ears were so far forward they nearly touched, and he let out a sound I'd never heard from him before. Not quite a whinny, not quite a scream. Something in between that made the hair on my arm stand up. That's when I understood what I was hearing, son. Cannon fire. Distant as a prayer, whispered in a windstorm, but cannon fire all the same. The war had come close enough that even here, 30 miles from the nearest town, we could hear its voice carried on the night air. But here's the strange part, Thomas. Old Jack heard it before I did. How long had he been listening to those guns, knowing what they meant while the rest of us went about our business? How long had he been carrying that knowledge in his heart, waiting for someone to understand? Your mother would have understood right away. She had the gift for reading animals' hearts, same as her own mother before her. Remember how she used to say that Patch, our old dog, always knew when you children were coming down with something, how he'd plant himself by a sick child's bed and wouldn't budge until the fever broke. She said animals could see into the spaces between things, into the places where trouble lives before it shows itself to human eyes. I'm starting to think she was right about that, and I'm starting to think old Jack can see farther than any of us. He's been off his feed lately, too. I put out his oats every morning, same as always, but he just picks at them half-heartedly. Not like he's sick. His eyes are bright, and his coat still shines like polished copper when the sun hits it just right. No, it's more like he's preoccupied, like his mind is somewhere else entirely. Sometimes I catch him staring at nothing I can see, his whole body gone still as a statue. When I follow his gaze, all I see is empty pasture, maybe a hawk circling high overhead or a rabbit darting between the oak trees. But Jack sees something more. I'm sure of it. Yesterday evening, I was bringing him his supper when he did the strangest thing. He walked right up to me, calm as you please, and pressed his big head against my chest. Just stood there, breathing slow and deep, like he was trying to tell me something important. His breath was warm against my shirt, and I could feel his heartbeat, steady but fast, like he'd been running even though he'd been standing still. I put my arms around his neck, the way I used to see you do when you thought no one was watching, and I swear I felt him relax just a little, like maybe sharing the weight of whatever he was carrying made it a bit easier to bear. "What is it, old boy?" I whispered into his mane. "What are you trying to tell me?" He pulled back then and looked at me with those dark eyes of his, eyes that have always reminded me of your own, deep and thoughtful and full of secrets. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw understanding there, like he knew I was trying to listen but just couldn't hear what he was saying. Then he turned away and walked back to his spot by the gate, back to his vigil. "I've been thinking a lot about the day you left, son. How Jack seemed to know before any of us said a word that something was different. You came out to the barn that morning to say goodbye, still wearing your new uniform with the brass buttons that caught the light like fallen stars. Jack took one look at you and started pacing in his stall, restless and agitated. You spent near an hour with him, talking low and soft, the way you always did, running your hands along his neck and telling him things the rest of us weren't meant to hear. I watched from the barn door, not wanting to intrude on whatever you two were working out between you. When you finally came out, your eyes were red-rimmed, though you tried to hide it by pulling your cap down low. Jack had gone quiet by then, but he watched you walk away with an intensity that made my chest tight, like he was memorizing every detail, storing up the sight of you to last through whatever was coming. That horse knew you weren't just going to town or over to the Hendersons' place to help with their harvest. He knew you were leaving for something bigger and more dangerous, something that might take you away for good. Animals always know when it's time to say goodbye for real. Now, months later, he's still waiting, still listening, still hoping. The other day, young Billy Patterson came by to help me repair the fence along the creek. Good boy, Billy, though not much with a hammer. Reminds me of myself at that age, all enthusiasm and no skill. While we were working, old Jack wandered over to watch, the way he sometimes does when there's company. Billy, being friendly as his father raised him, reached out to pat Jack's nose. That horse reared back like Billy was holding a rattlesnake, ears pinned flat against his head. Not mean, mind you, just unwelcoming, like he was saying, "You're not the one I'm waiting for." Poor Billy looked hurt, and I felt bad for the boy. "Don't take it personal," I told him. "Jack's got particular ideas about who he'll take to." But that got me thinking, Thomas. What if Jack won't work for me or accept kindness from neighbors because he's saving himself? What if he's keeping all his trust, all his loyalty, all his strength held in reserve for the day you come home? I've seen horses do stranger things. Old Pete, the draft horse we had before you were born, pined himself to death after your grandfather passed. Wouldn't eat, wouldn't drink, just stood in the corner of his stall with his head hanging low, until one morning we found him laid out peaceful as a Sunday sermon. The veterinary said there wasn't a thing wrong with him that medicine could fix. Said sometimes a heart just decides it's had enough of missing somebody. But Jack's different. Jack's not pining. He's preparing, getting himself ready for something. I can see it in the way he holds himself, alert and expectant, like a soldier standing watch, waiting for the signal that never comes. Sometimes I wonder if he can smell the war on the wind. You know how keen his nose is. Remember how he used to find your hiding spots when you were small, following your scent through the woods like a bloodhound. Maybe he can smell gunpowder and fear and all the other terrible perfumes that cling to soldiers. Maybe that's what keeps him so on edge, knowing that somewhere out there you're breathing that same poisoned air. The weather's been strange this year, Thomas. Hot when it should be cool, dry when it should be wet, and the light. There's something wrong with the light. It has a quality I've never seen before, yellowish and thick, like it's carrying dust from battlefields we'll never see. The animals all feel it. The cows cluster together in the shade, even on mild days. The chickens won't venture far from the coop. Even the barn cats, usually bold as brass, slink around with their bellies low to the ground. But old Jack feels it most of all. He stands at that gate of his, neck stretched long, testing every breath of air that comes his way. Sometimes his lips curl back from his teeth, and I know he's catching scents that would turn a man's stomach. The smell of too many men living too close together, the smell of wounds that won't heal, the smell of horses that have seen too much and asked for too little. Your brother Samuel thinks I'm getting fanciful in my old age, reading signs that aren't there. He says a horse is just a horse, and Jack's probably just missing the work you used to give him. Says maybe I should sell him to someone who could put him to better use. But Samuel doesn't understand what you and I both know. Old Jack isn't just a horse any more than you're just my son. He's family. He's the part of you that stayed behind when the rest of you marched off to war. And as long as he's waiting by that gate, ears forward and hope alive in his heart, then I know you're still out there somewhere, still fighting, still finding ways to come home. I dream about you both sometimes, son. I dream you're riding Jack across the south field, the morning mist rising around his hooves like silver smoke. In the dreams, you're whole and laughing, and Jack is young again, all fire and spirit, carrying you toward some grand adventure instead of away from one. When I wake from those dreams, the first thing I do is look out the window toward the gate, and there's Jack, solid and real and patient as sunset, reminding me that some things endure. Some loyalties run too deep for time or distance or even war to break. I want you to know something, Thomas. When you do come home, and notice I said when, not if, because Jack has convinced me it's only a matter of time. When you come home, that horse will be waiting. He'll hear your voice before you come into sight, will know the sound of your boots on the dirt road, will feel your heart beating from a mile away. And when you finally walk through that gate, when you put your arms around his neck and breathe in the sweet smell of home, old Jack will know that all his waiting was worth it, all his listening, all his hoping, all his stubborn refusal to let anyone else take your place. It will all make sense in that moment when you're together again. Until then, I'll take care of him for you. I'll make sure he has oats and hay and fresh water, even if he won't let me put a halter on him. I'll talk to him about you, tell him about the letters you send when they reach us. Remind him that somewhere out there, his boy is thinking of him too, because I know you are, son. I know you remember the weight of his head on your shoulder, the sound he makes when he's content, the way he used to follow you around a barnyard like a great copper shadow. I know that when the cannons are too loud and the world seems too broken to ever heal, you close your eyes and picture Jack waiting by the gate, ears forward, hope alive in his patient heart. Animals don't lie, Thomas. They don't pretend everything's fine when it's not. Don't make promises they can't keep. Don't tell you what they think you want to hear. When old Jack looks toward that road with such certainty, such faith, I have to believe he knows something the rest of us are still learning. He knows you're coming home. Come home safe, son. Come home soon. Your horse is waiting, and so am I. Your loving father, Ezra Whitmore. Lost letter. I draw maps of streets that no longer exist. This letter was discovered in 2014 during restoration of the Academy of Arts building in St. Petersburg. Petersburg, found inside a leather portfolio hidden beneath floorboards in what had been a drafting room, the letter was written on architectural paper with technical ink that had faded to sepia. The envelope was addressed to Professor Mikhail Antonovich Petrov, Moscow Institute of Architecture, but was never posted. January 1944, Leningrad Academy of Arts, the day the blockade was lifted. My dear Mikhail Antonovich, I draw maps of streets that no longer exist. Today marks exactly 872 days since the Germans closed the ring around our city, and as I write this, I can hear celebrations in the distance, church bells ringing, people singing, the sound of joy echoing through neighborhoods that have known only silence and sorrow for so long. The blockade is broken, my friend. The siege is over. But the city I am documenting in my drawings is not the Leningrad that existed before September 1941, nor will it be the city that rises from these ruins. It is something else entirely, a ghost city, a collection of memories made manifest in stone and rubble, a testament to what was lost and what, God willing, might yet be recovered. I sit surrounded by blueprints and elevation drawings, technical sketches and restoration plans, all spread across tables in this bombed-out studio where we once taught students to appreciate the classical proportions of Rastrelli's Baroque facades. Half the ceiling has collapsed, letting in snow that never melts, and my ink freezes in the bottle if I don't keep it close to the small fire I maintain in what used to be a waste basket. But I draw. Every day through the worst of the siege, through the hunger and cold and bombardments, I have continued to draw, not from life. Too much of life here has become death, but from memory, from photographs when I can find them. From the architectural surveys we conducted in the 1930s when preservation seemed like an academic exercise rather than an act of desperate salvage. I draw the Anichkov Palace as it stood before the bombs found it, with its elegant windows and decorated pediments intact. I sketch the Catherine Palace at Tsarskoye Selo, reconstructing from memory the intricate details of the amber panels that German soldiers stripped away like vandals looting a tomb. I map the streets of the old city, marking where buildings once stood, where gardens once bloomed, where the careful urban planning of 3 centuries created spaces that made the human soul feel larger. These are not mere technical exercises, Mikhail Antonovich. Each line I draw is an act of faith. Each measurement I record is a prayer. Each detail I capture is a promise to the future that beauty once existed here and might exist again. Do you remember when we were students together at the Institute how Professor Volkonsky used to say that architecture was frozen music? How the proportions of a classical facade were like the mathematical relationships in a Bach fugue, creating harmony through the precise ordering of space and form? I understand those words differently now. Architecture is not frozen music. It is music that can be silenced, harmony that can be shattered, beauty that can be destroyed by men who understand nothing of what they are destroying. But it is also music that can be remembered, harmony that can be reconstructed, beauty that can be reborn if there are people willing to preserve the score. That is what I am doing here, my friend. I am preserving the score. Yesterday I spent 6 hours documenting what remains of the summer garden. Do you remember how we used to walk there on Sunday afternoons, discussing Leblanc's sculptural program, debating the influence of Versailles on Russian garden design? The lime trees that once formed perfect alleys have been cut down for firewood. The marble statues that survived the iconoclasm of the Revolution have been damaged by shrapnel, their classical faces scarred by the fragments of modern warfare. But I measured and drew and recorded anyway. The basic structure of the garden remains. The paths that create the geometric framework, the canal that defines the northern boundary, the iron fence that Yuri Felton designed to separate paradise from the everyday world. The bones of the design are still there, waiting for new flesh. I found fragments of one of the sculptures half buried in snow, a piece of drapery from one of the allegorical figures, carved with such skill that even broken and discolored, it retained the capacity to move the heart. I held it in my hands, hands that have grown thin and weak from 2 years of near starvation, and I could feel the ghost of the artist who carved it 2 centuries ago, feel his confidence that beauty was worth preserving, that future generations would treasure what he had created. Was he wrong, that long-dead sculptor? Have we proven that beauty is not worth preserving? That human beings will always choose destruction over creation, vandalism over art? Some days I think so. Some days, when I walk through the ruins of the Gostiny Dvor or see what shells have done to the facade of the Hermitage, I wonder if we are not simply deluding ourselves. Perhaps human civilization is just a thin veneer over barbarity. Perhaps our cities and monuments and carefully planned public spaces are just elaborate sandcastles waiting for the tide to wash them away. But then I return to my drawings, and I remember why I continue this work. Last month, while documenting the damage to St. Isaac's Cathedral, I encountered a group of children playing in the rubble around the construction scaffolding. They were thin and pale, these children of the siege, dressed in layers of adult clothing that hung on their small frames like costumes in a play about survival. But they were playing, creating games out of broken stones, inventing stories about the damaged building, finding wonder in the midst of destruction. One little girl, perhaps 7 years old, approached me as I worked on my elevation drawings of the cathedral's dome. She watched me draw for several minutes with the focused attention that children bring to adult mysteries. "What are you making?" she asked finally. "I'm drawing the church," I told her, "so that people will remember how beautiful it was." She studied my drawings with the seriousness of a critic examining a masterpiece. "Will they fix it?" she asked. "Will they make it beautiful again?" "I hope so," I said. "That's why I'm drawing it." She nodded gravely, as if this made perfect sense to her. "My mama draws too," she said. "She draws pictures of our old apartment, the one we had before the bombs. She says drawings help you remember. From the mouths of babes, as they say, drawings help you remember. But more than that, they help you believe that what is remembered can be restored, that what was beautiful once can be beautiful again. I think of that child often as I work. She represents the future I am drawing for, not the present generation, who have seen too much destruction to fully believe in reconstruction, but the generation that will inherit whatever we manage to preserve of our cultural memory. They will walk through the restored palaces and gardens. They will attend concerts in rebuilt halls. They will study in libraries filled with books that survived the siege or were carefully reprinted from salvaged copies. They will take for granted the beauty that we are fighting so desperately to preserve. And that is as it should be. That is what we are working toward, a time when architectural beauty is once again taken for granted, when the careful planning of public spaces is seen as normal rather than miraculous, when children can play in gardens without dodging shrapnel from the sky. The technical challenges of reconstruction are immense, Mikhail Antonovich. How do you rebuild the amber room when the original amber has been scattered to the winds? How do you restore frescoes when only fragments remain? Paintings when the canvases have been damaged beyond conventional repair? How do you recreate the subtle proportions of a Rastrelli facade when the original building exists only in photographs and memory? These are not merely questions of craftsmanship, though craftsmanship will certainly be required. They are questions of philosophy, of what we mean when we speak of preservation and restoration. Are we trying to recreate the past exactly as it was, or are we creating something new that honors the memory of what was lost? I have been studying the Japanese concept of mono no aware, the pathos of things, the bittersweet awareness of the impermanence of all beautiful things. Perhaps what we are creating here in Leningrad will carry that quality. The restored buildings and gardens will be beautiful, but they will also carry within them the memory of their destruction, the knowledge that beauty is fragile and must be consciously protected. The scars will show, I think, not literally. Our craftsmen are too skilled for that, but metaphorically. The rebuilt city will be haunted by the ghost of its former self, shaped by the knowledge of what was lost and what it cost to recover even a portion of it. I have been working closely with a team of archivists who spent the siege years protecting documents and photographs in the basement of the academy. They tell remarkable stories of preservation under impossible conditions. Scholars who risked their lives to save architectural drawings. Librarians who shared their bread rations with mice to prevent them from eating irreplaceable manuscripts. Curators who slept in the hermitage to guard paintings that had been removed from their frames and rolled up for protection. These people understood something that the destroyers did not, that culture is not luxury but necessity, that the preservation of beauty is not vanity but survival, that human beings cannot live by bread alone. They need music and art and the ordered spaces that architecture provides. One of these archivists, an elderly woman named Ekaterina Mikhailovna, showed me a photograph of herself taken before the war. She is standing in the Catherine Palace, surrounded by the amber panels that made the room famous throughout Europe. She is young and elegant, dressed in the style of the 1930s, smiling with the confidence of someone who believes that beautiful things will endure simply because they are beautiful. The woman who showed me this photograph bore little resemblance to the young woman in it. 2 years of siege had aged her decades, carved lines of grief and determination into her face. taken away the comfortable assumption that beauty would preserve itself. But her hands, when she handled the photograph, were steady. Her voice, when she described the room as it had been, was clear and strong. She has made herself into a living archive, a repository of memory that no bomb can destroy, no army can capture. They took the amber, she told me, but they could not take what I carry in my mind. Every panel, every detail, every play of light across the golden surfaces, it is all here. She tapped her temple with one thin finger. And someday, we will use what is here to bring it back. This is the spirit that drives our work, Mikhail Antonovich. Not nostalgia for a lost past, but determination to create a future worthy of what we have inherited. We are not museum curators preserving dead artifacts, but gardeners planting seeds for a harvest we may not live to see. The practical aspects of this work would amaze you. We have learned to make ink from soot and water, to create drawing paper from materials I will not specify because they were too precious to waste on explanation. We have measured buildings by candlelight, recorded details while shells fell around us, preserved photographs in containers that also served as cooking pots when food was available to cook. But perhaps most remarkably, we have learned to see beauty in ruin itself. The broken dome of a church silhouetted against a winter sky has its own stark magnificence. The empty windows of a palace, framing views of a garden grown wild, create compositions that no architect planned, but which speak to something deep in the human heart. I do not romanticize destruction, my friend. Too much has been lost, too many lives sacrificed, too much beauty reduced to rubble. But I have learned that even destruction cannot entirely destroy the human capacity to find meaning in disorder, to create new forms of beauty from the fragments of the old. My drawings reflect this understanding. They are not merely technical documents, but artistic interpretations, attempts to capture not just the physical reality of these buildings, but their spiritual significance, their role in creating the spaces where human culture could flourish. When I draw the facade of the Winter Palace, I am not just recording the dimensions of windows and the spacing of columns. I am trying to capture the sense of grandeur that those proportions were meant to create. The way the building's scale makes the human visitor feel both small and elevated, both humbled and inspired. When I map the streets of the old city, I am not just creating a guide for reconstruction, but a meditation on how urban planning can create community, how the arrangement of buildings and public spaces can encourage the kinds of human interaction that make civilization possible. Each drawing is a small act of faith that these spaces will exist again, that future generations will walk through them and feel what we felt when we first encountered them, that the careful work of centuries of architects and planners and craftsmen will not be lost to the barbarism of a single war. The work continues even as the celebration of our liberation echoes through the city. Tomorrow, I will return to my drawings, my measurements, my careful documentation of what was and what might be again. There are palaces to resurrect, gardens to replant, public spaces to reimagine for a generation that has learned the true value of beauty through its temporary loss. I draw maps of streets that no longer exist, my friend, but I draw them with the confidence that they will exist again. Different, perhaps, scarred by memory, certainly, but beautiful still, and worthy of the sacrifice that preserved them. The ink in my pen flows freely today. The first time in months that it has not frozen. Perhaps this is a sign, a small symbol of the warming that is coming to our wounded city. Spring will arrive eventually, and with it, the work of rebuilding will begin in earnest. When that day comes, we will be ready. The plans will be drawn, the measurements recorded, the vision preserved. What was destroyed by hatred will be restored by love. What was scattered by war will be gathered by peace. What was forgotten in the chaos of survival will be remembered in the quiet work of reconstruction. I draw maps of streets that no longer exist, but I draw them for the day when they will exist again. Your faithful colleague, Pavel Ivanovich. Postscript. I have enclosed with this letter a small sketch of the Admiralty spire as it appears today, damaged but still standing, still pointing toward heaven despite everything that has tried to bring it down. It is not a technical drawing, but a personal one, an attempt to capture what this symbol of our city means to those of us who have survived to see its restoration. Keep it as a reminder that some things endure, that human creativity is stronger than human destructiveness, that beauty has a way of surviving even the most determined attempts to destroy it. The siege is over, but the real work is just beginning. This letter was discovered along with hundreds of architectural drawings and photographs documenting wartime damage to Leningrad's historic buildings. According to Academy records, Pavel Ivanovich Volkov supervised major restoration projects throughout the 1940s and 1950s, including work on the Catherine Palace, the Hermitage, and numerous churches damaged during the siege. Many of his wartime drawings became the foundation for post-war reconstruction efforts. The sketch of the Admiralty spire mentioned in the letter was found with the document and is now displayed in the Museum of the Siege of Leningrad. Volkov died in 1987 at the age of 89, having lived to see most of the buildings he documented during the siege fully restored. His funeral was attended by hundreds of architects, craftsmen, and cultural officials who credited his wartime preservation work with making the restoration of Leningrad's architectural heritage possible. A plaque in the Academy of Arts reads, "In memory of those who preserved beauty in the darkest hours, who drew maps of hope when hope seemed impossible."